When he was kicked out of the system at 16 and inherited a derelict ice house, he thought it was the universe's final joke. But what he discovered inside wasn't just about the past. It was about a future he never knew he could have. If you've ever felt like you were starting from less than zero, or if you believe that second chances are real, stick around. Hit that subscribe button and become part of a community that understands. This story is for you. The day I turned 18, the state of California officially washed its hands of me. There was no party. There was a thin manila folder, a final signature on a form I didn't read, and a handshake from a caseworker named Mr. Davies that felt like touching a bundle of dry twigs. He'd been my caseworker for the last 2 years, since I'd landed in the North Hills group home after getting kicked out of my last foster placement. 2 years of twice-monthly check-ins that lasted exactly 15 minutes. 2 years of him looking at his watch while asking if I was accessing my potential. Now, my potential had been accessed. I was an adult. His job was done. "So that's it?" I asked, holding the folder. It was warm from his hands. "That's it, Leo," he said, already turning back to his desk, to a teetering stack of other folders, other kids. "You have the transitional stipend, you have the list of resources. The bus pass is valid for 1 week. My advice? Find a room to rent before you spend a dime on anything else. Good luck." Good luck. The 2 emptiest words in the English language. I walked out of the administrative office and back into the main wing of the group home. It was 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the place had the usual smell of disinfectant, overboiled vegetables, and low-grade despair. A few of the younger kids were watching a cartoon on the common room TV, the volume turned up to a distorted roar. No one looked at me. In a place like this, you learn not to watch the departures. It's bad luck. It reminds you of the clock ticking on your own wall. My worldly possessions fit into a single black trash bag, a few changes of clothes, a worn paperback copy of a book I'd read a dozen times, a toothbrush, and a small framed photo of a woman I was told was my mother. She was smiling, squinting into a sun I couldn't see. I never knew her. She died when I was a baby, and my father was a ghost, a blank space on a birth certificate. For 16 years I'd been raised by my grandfather, a quiet, gruff man who smelled of sawdust and wintergreen. Then, one day, he was gone, and I was in the system. The official story was abandonment. He packed a bag and left. That was the story I'd been carrying for 2 years. The story that had curdled inside me into a hard, bitter stone. I slung the bag over my shoulder and walked out the front door without looking back. The California sun was bright and indifferent. It was the first moment of my adult life, and I felt nothing. Not excitement, not fear, just a profound and hollow emptiness. I was a ship cut from its moorings, and there was no wind, no current, no land in sight. I had $400 from the state, a week-long bus pass, and a manila folder full of useless phone numbers for shelters and job placement programs that were all perpetually full. And I had one other thing, a letter. It had arrived a week ago, addressed to me, care of the group home. The envelope was thick and creamy, made of a paper I'd never felt before. The return address was a law firm downtown, Albright and Hayes, attorneys at law. For a week I'd kept it in my pocket, the corner of the envelope growing soft and frayed. I was afraid to open it. Kids in the system don't get letters from lawyers unless it's about juvenile court. But I hadn't been in trouble. Not real trouble, anyway. So I'd waited for this day, for the moment when I was truly on my own. I walked 3 blocks to a small, cracked park and sat on a bench that was still damp with morning dew. The trash bag sat beside me like a silent, lumpy companion. I took out the letter. My hands were shaking just slightly. I told myself it was the morning chill. I tore it open. The letterhead was heavy, embossed. It felt like money. The message was short, typed, and formal. Dear Mr. Rojas, this letter is to inform you that upon the occasion of your 18th birthday, you are to come into an inheritance as stipulated by the last will and testament of your grandfather, Mr. Arthur Rojas. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to schedule an appointment with Miss Eleanor Albright to discuss the particulars of the estate. Sincerely, Albright and Hayes. My breath caught in my chest. Inheritance, estate. These were words from movies, from books about rich people. They had nothing to do with me. They certainly had nothing to do with my grandfather. Arthur Rojas was a handyman who drove a beat-up Ford truck and lived in a rented bungalow that was always cold. The man who, I believed, had walked out on me without a word. What could he possibly have left me? A box of old tools? A fishing rod? The bitter memory of his back as he walked away? I read the letter again and again. A tiny, fragile spark flickered to life in the hollow space inside me. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was just curiosity. A question mark in the flat, gray landscape of my future. I folded the letter, put it back in my pocket, and stood up. I left the trash bag on the bench. I didn't need it anymore. I walked toward the bus stop, the one that would take me downtown. I had an appointment to make. The offices of Albright and Hayes were on the 32nd floor of a glass and steel tower that scraped the sky. The lobby was all marble and hushed whispers, a place so clean and quiet it felt like a church for money. I gave my name to the receptionist, a woman with hair like a black helmet, and she looked at me with an expression that was professionally blank, but personally disapproving. I was wearing my best jeans, the ones with only one rip in the knee, and a faded hoodie. I was acutely aware of how out of place I was. I was a stray dog in a palace. I sat on a leather couch that probably cost more than my grandfather's truck, and waited. After a few minutes that felt like an hour, a woman appeared. She was tall, in her late 50s, with sharp gray eyes and a calm, no-nonsense face. She wore a dark gray suit that looked both comfortable and powerful. "Mr. Rojas? I'm Eleanor Albright. Please, come in." Her office was less intimidating than the lobby. It had a huge window with a staggering view of the city, but the room itself was filled with books and stacks of files. It felt like a place where actual work got done. She gestured for me to sit in a chair opposite her large, tidy desk. "Thank you for coming in so promptly," she said, her voice even and low. "And happy birthday, by the way. 18 is a significant milestone." "Thanks," I mumbled, feeling my face flush. She opened a thick file on her desk. It had my name on it. "Leo, I was your grandfather's lawyer for many years. He was a good man, a very private man." I just nodded, my throat tight. I didn't know what to say. The man she was describing didn't sound like the man who had abandoned me. "He came to me about 3 years ago to draw up his will," she continued, her eyes on the papers. "He was very specific about the terms. He stipulated that I was not to contact you until your 18th birthday. He wanted you to finish your time in the state's care, as he put it." Finish my time, like a prison sentence. The bitterness rose in my throat, hot and familiar. Why? Why did he leave? The question slipped out before I could stop it. It was the question that had haunted my sleep for 2 years. Ms. Albright looked up from the file, and her gaze was direct, but not unkind. "That's a complicated question, Leo, and I think the answers your grandfather left for you are not in these legal documents. They are somewhere else. My role here today is to execute his will, to tell you what he left you." She paused, taking a breath. "Arthur left you a single asset. It's a piece of real estate, a commercial property in a town called North Fork, up in the mountains." "A property?" I said, confused. "What kind of property?" "It was, for many decades, the North Fork Ice and Cold Storage Facility," she said. "An old ice house." An ice house. I almost laughed. Of all the strange, useless things to inherit, what was I going to do with an ice house? I'd grown up in Southern California. The only ice I knew came from a refrigerator. "He and your grandmother bought it a long time ago," she went on, oblivious to my internal turmoil. "It was their first investment. It hasn't been operational in over 20 years. To be frank, Leo, the building is likely in a state of significant disrepair." She slid a photograph across the desk. It was a slightly faded color print. A large, windowless brick building with a corrugated metal extension stood against a backdrop of dark green pines. The sky was a pale, washed-out gray. The place looked less like a building and more like a fortress or a tomb. It looked cold, even in the picture. "Okay," I said slowly. "So I own that." "You do," she confirmed. "However, there are 2 complications." She was all business now. "First, there are significant back taxes owed on the property, to the tune of about $19,000. If they are not paid within the next 90 days, the county will seize the property and sell it at auction." $19,000. She might as well have said 19 million. I had $400 and a bus pass. A bitter laugh did escape my lips this time. "So, he left me a debt." "He left you a choice," she corrected gently. "Which brings me to the second complication, or in this case, a potential solution." She pulled another document from the file. "I've been contacted by a developer, a company called Aspen Ridge Estates. They've been buying up land in and around North Fork for a new resort project. They are very interested in your parcel. They've made a standing cash offer." She turned the paper around for me to see. My eyes scanned the text, but I only saw the number at the bottom. $75,000. My mind raced. 75,000. I could pay the 19,000 in taxes. That would leave, I did the math quickly, $56,000. To me, it was a fortune. It was a new life. It was a clean slate. It was an apartment, a car, a chance to go to community college. It was everything I didn't have. "They need an answer within 60 days, Ms. Albright said, watching my face. "If you accept, we can close quickly. The funds would be transferred, the back taxes paid directly from escrow, and the remainder would be yours. It would be a very clean, simple transaction." Simple. Clean. Walk away with $56,000 and never have to think about a broken-down ice house in a town I'd never heard of. Never have to think about my grandfather again. I could take the money and run. It was the ultimate freedom. But then I looked at the photograph again, the grim, silent building. My grandmother and grandfather had bought it, their first investment. Why did they keep it all those years, paying taxes on a derelict building? Why didn't they sell it when they were, as I assumed, struggling for money? Why leave it to me, along with a debt and a convenient buyout offer? Why didn't he just sell it himself and leave me the money? I asked. Miss Albright leaned back in her chair. That's another one of those questions I can't answer, Leo. All I know is what he wrote in his will. The property and everything within it is yours. He was very clear on that point. Everything within it. Everything within it. The phrase echoed in my mind. What else was in an abandoned ice house besides old machinery and rats? I want to see it, I said, the words surprising me as much as they seemed to surprise her. She raised an eyebrow. Go to North Fork? Leo, it's a 6-hour bus ride. There's not much there. The offer from Aspen Ridge is a good one. It's more than the land is worth, frankly. They want it for the location, not the building. I don't care, I said, a stubbornness I didn't know I possessed rising up in me. He left it to me. He left me the building, not just the money. I need to see it. Ms. Albright studied me for a long moment. Her professional mask softened, and for a second I saw something else in her eyes. Respect, maybe. Or perhaps just pity. All right, she said finally, nodding slowly. I understand. She wrote something on a small notepad. The keys are in a lockbox at the property. Here is the address and the combination. The bus leaves from the downtown terminal twice a day, morning and evening. Be careful, Leo. It gets cold up there. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier than they had all day. I will. One more thing, she said as I reached the door. I turned back. Your grandfather. He talked about you a lot. He was very proud of you. I didn't know what to do with that information. It didn't fit the narrative I'd built. It was a puzzle piece from a different box. I just nodded, unable to speak, and walked out of her office, out of the silent marble lobby, and back into the noise and the glare of the city. But this time, I wasn't just wandering. I had a destination. I was going to North Fork. The bus station was a chaotic symphony of diesel fumes, shouted announcements, and the low hum of 100 conversations. I used $50 of my stipend to buy a one-way ticket to North Fork. The man behind the scratched plexiglass window had to search for it in his system, a sign that not many people were heading that way. The bus was old, the seats covered in a scratchy, patterned fabric that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. I found a seat by a window that was clouded with grime and settled in for the long ride. As the bus pulled out of the city, I watched the landscape transform. The sprawling concrete jungle of Los Angeles, with its endless traffic and towering buildings, slowly gave way to suburbs, then to dry, rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The sun beat down, and the air conditioning on the bus struggled, blowing lukewarm air that did little to combat the heat. For the first 2 hours, I just watched the world go by, my mind a blank. The conversation with Ms. Albright replayed itself over and over. An ice house, back taxes, a $75,000 offer. It felt unreal, like a dream I was about to wake up from. After a stop in a dusty Central Valley town where the air was thick and heavy, the bus began to climb. The landscape changed again. The brown hills turned to green, covered in dense forests of pine and fir. The road narrowed, winding its way up into the mountains. The temperature dropped with every mile we gained in elevation. I pulled my thin hoodie tighter around me. Ms. Albright's warning echoed in my head. It gets cold up there. The other passengers were a quiet bunch. A few farm workers heading home, an elderly woman knitting, a young couple with a baby. No one spoke to me. I was an island, just as I had been in the group home. But here, on this bus, hurtling toward an unknown future, the solitude felt different. It wasn't loneliness. It was anticipation. I thought about my grandfather. The man I remembered was tall and wiry, with hands that were calloused and strong, but always gentle with me. He taught me how to tie my shoes, how to skip a stone across a lake, how to fix a leaky faucet. He rarely smiled, but when he did, his whole face crinkled up around his eyes. He never talked about my parents. He never talked about the past at all. Our life was a simple, quiet routine: school, homework, dinner, sleep. And then, one Tuesday, I came home from school to find a strange woman from Child Protective Services waiting for me. She told me my grandfather was gone, that he had left. She used the word abandoned, and I, a 16-year-old boy, had believed her. It was easier to believe in his cruelty than to face the terrifying possibility that I was simply not worth staying for. The bus wheezed its way higher into the mountains. Patches of old snow appeared in the shadows by the side of the road, looking like dirty remnants of a forgotten winter. The sky turned a deep, bruised purple as the sun began to set behind the jagged peaks. The air that leaked through the window seals was now genuinely cold, sharp, and clean. It smelled of pine needles and damp earth. It was a smell from a life I'd almost forgotten, from camping trips my grandfather had taken me on when I was very small. It was full dark when the bus finally slowed, its air brakes hissing. The driver called out, "North Fork! This is North Fork!" I grabbed my small backpack. I'd bought it and a few supplies with the last of my stipend, and stumbled down the steps. The bus pulled away, its red taillights disappearing around a bend, leaving me in an almost perfect silence. I was standing in front of a small, one-story building with a single flickering light bulb over the door. A sign read, "North Fork General Store and Post Office." Across the street, a bar called the Timberline cast a warm, yellow glow onto the empty sidewalk. And that was it. That was the town. The air was so cold, it felt like a physical slap. I could see my breath, a white plume in the dim light. I zipped up my hoodie, but it was useless against the biting chill. I was dressed for Los Angeles, not for this. Following Ms. Albright's directions, I walked down the town's main and seemingly only street. The buildings were old, with false fronts and peeling paint, like a set from a Western movie. There were no other people, no cars. The only sound was the crunch of my own footsteps on the gravelly asphalt and the distant sigh of the wind in the pines. After about a quarter of a mile, the streetlights ended. I was plunged into a darkness so profound it felt like a heavy blanket. I used the flashlight on my phone to find my way. The address was another half-mile down the road. The beam cut a weak, trembling circle in the immense dark. I felt a prickle of fear. I was completely, utterly alone. For a moment, I thought about turning back, about finding a motel, if one even existed, and calling Ms. Albright in the morning to tell her to take the deal. This was crazy. I was a city kid. What was I doing in the middle of a forest in the dead of night? But then I saw it, a hulking silhouette against the star-dusted sky, blacker than the surrounding trees. It was huge, far bigger than it had looked in the photograph. The ice house. I walked closer, my light beam dancing across a weathered brick facade that rose 2 stories high, and a long, low extension made of rust-streaked metal. A chain-link fence, sagging in places, surrounded the property. The gate was secured with a heavy chain and a padlock, but it hung open, unlocked. I found the lockbox attached to the main door, a heavy, insulated steel door with a small, barred window. My fingers were numb with cold as I fumbled with the combination Ms. Albright had given me. The tumblers clicked, and the small box popped open. Inside was a single, heavy brass key. It felt ancient, solid, real. I put the key in the lock. It was stiff from disuse. I had to put my shoulder into it, turning with all my weight. There was a loud, groaning clank that echoed in the night, and the door swung inward into absolute blackness. A wave of cold, stale air washed over me, a smell I couldn't place. It was the smell of dust, of damp concrete, of metal, and something else, something clean and sterile, like the air after a thunderstorm. The smell of cold itself. I took a deep breath, held it, and stepped across the threshold, out of the world I knew and into the one my grandfather had left for me. The beam from my phone's flashlight was swallowed by the immense, cavernous space. I was standing on a concrete floor, in a room so large it felt more like an outdoor plaza than an indoor space. The ceiling was lost in the darkness high above me. My light caught the glint of metal, thick, rusted hooks hanging from a conveyor system that snaked across the ceiling. Heavy machinery, silent and monolithic, stood like sleeping iron beasts in the shadows. The walls were thick, insulated, and windowless. The silence in here was different from the silence outside. It was a dead, sound-absorbent quiet that pressed in on my ears. It was the silence of a place that had been sealed for a very long time. I walked slowly, cautiously, my footsteps echoing unnervingly in the vast chamber. Dust motes, thick as insects, swarmed in the beam of my light. Everything was covered in a uniform blanket of gray dust. It was a perfect, undisturbed ruin. I ran my hand along a wall, and the insulation felt strangely spongy under the layer of grime. I imagined giant blocks of ice, clear and cold, being hauled through this space on those hooks, loaded onto trucks to be taken down the mountain to the sweltering cities. It was a ghost of an industry, a ghost of a time I couldn't imagine. I followed the wall, my light tracing a path. I passed through a wide opening into the corrugated metal part of the building. This section was different. It was a massive, open warehouse, colder than the first room. The floor was lined with wooden slats, and I could see deep, dark pits beneath them, where I supposed the ice was once stored. The scale of the place was overwhelming. It wasn't just a building, it was a factory, a monument. I felt a growing sense of awe mixed with a deep, chilling unease. Why would my grandfather keep this place? It was a ruin, a mausoleum. The developer's offer seemed more and more like a lifeline, a rescue from this cold, dead place. Then I remembered Ms. Albright's words. Everything within it. I started searching more methodically. There had to be an office, a place where the business side of things was handled. After 10 minutes of exploring the ground floor, I found a narrow metal staircase in a corner of the main brick building. It led up into the darkness. I tested the first step. It groaned, but held my weight. I climbed, my light pointed upwards, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. At the top of the stairs was a small landing and a single door with a frosted glass window, so grimy I couldn't see through it. The words, Manager, A. Rojas, were painted on the glass, but the letters were flaking and barely legible. A. Rojas. Arthur Rojas. My grandfather. The doorknob didn't turn. Locked. I rattled it, frustrated. I was about to give up, to try and kick it in, when I noticed something. A small nail hammered into the door frame just above the knob, and hanging from it, almost invisible in the gloom, was a tiny key on a piece of string. It was the kind of thing you would only see if you were looking for it. A simple, stupidly obvious hiding place. My grandfather, the handyman, always practical. I unlocked the door and pushed it open. The office was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. A cramped box overlooking the vast, dark factory floor through a large interior window. A single metal desk and a swivel chair sat in the middle of the room. A filing cabinet stood against one wall, and a calendar was tacked to another. Everything was coated in the same thick gray dust. I ran my finger across the desk, leaving a clean, dark streak. I walked over to the calendar. It was a cheap one from a local hardware store. The picture was of a mountain lake. The month was July. The year was 2 years ago. A single date was circled in red pen. The 15th, the day I came home from school and found him gone. My stomach clenched. He was here, in this office, the day he disappeared from my life. I sat down in the swivel chair. It let out a piercing shriek of protest that was shockingly loud in the silence. I aimed my light at the desk. It was completely bare, except for a dusty telephone and an old Bakelite pen holder. I pulled open the drawers. They were all empty. I went to the filing cabinet. Also empty. A cold wave of disappointment washed over me. There was nothing here, no answers, just more dust and more ghosts. I slumped in the chair, the cold finally seeping deep into my bones. This was a mistake. I should have stayed in LA, taken the money. What was I even looking for? A note? An apology? Some grand revelation? There was nothing here but a decaying building and the lingering presence of a man who had left me. I kicked the desk in frustration. The impact made a hollow, metallic thud. But there was another sound, too. A faint, rattling scrape from underneath. I knelt down, shining my light under the desk. It was dark and cobwebbed, but as I scanned the underside, I saw it. Taped to the bottom of the cheap metal desk, almost perfectly centered, was a flat metal box. A strong box. About the size of a shoebox, painted institutional gray. It had a keyhole, but no key. My heart started pounding again, this time with a surge of adrenaline. I searched the desk again, more frantically this time. I ran my hands along every surface, inside every empty drawer, feeling for any hidden tape or compartment. Nothing. I was about to try and pry the box off when my hand brushed against the underside of the main drawer. My fingers snagged on something, a piece of tape. I pulled at it, and a small, flat key came loose into my palm. Another simple, practical hiding spot. I retrieved the strongbox. It was heavy. I set it on the desk, the metal scraping against the dusty surface. The key fit perfectly. With a deep breath, I turned it. The lock clicked open with a satisfying finality. I lifted the lid. I don't know what I was expecting. Money, maybe, or deeds, or legal papers. But it was none of those things. The box was filled with a stack of envelopes, dozens of them, all the same creamy, expensive paper as the one from the lawyer's office. They were bundled together with a piece of old twine. On the top envelope, written in a familiar, blocky handwriting that I recognized instantly from the notes he used to leave on the kitchen counter, were 5 words. For Leo, on his 18th birthday. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely untie the twine. These were letters. Letters from him, to me. I pulled one from the top of the stack. It was thick, heavy with pages. I sat back in the shrieking chair, aimed my phone's light at the paper, and began to read. My dearest Leo, if you are reading this, then it means two things. First, it means you are 18 years old, a man. Happy birthday, son. I wish more than anything I could be there to say that to you in person. Second, it means you are sitting in my old office, in the one place I managed to keep for you. I hope the cold isn't too bad. I imagine you have a lot of questions for me. And I imagine you hate me. I don't blame you. I have been living with that for 2 years. I want you to know the truth. Not the story the state told you, not the story you probably told yourself. The real story. It's the only thing I have left to give you. You were told I abandoned you. It is not true. I was forced to let you go. There is a difference, Leo. A universe of difference. To understand, you have to know about your grandmother, Maria. You have her eyes. She was the smartest, toughest, most beautiful woman I ever met. We built a life from nothing. We started a small construction company right here in North Fork. Rojas and Son Construction. We were good. We were honest. We built half the houses in this valley. Life was good. When your mother was born, we were so happy. And when you were born, and when we lost her, you became our whole world. After Maria passed away from the cancer, it was just you and me. And that was enough. But things were changing up here. The city was creeping closer. Big developers started sniffing around, buying up land. A company called Aspen Ridge came to town. They were sharks in expensive suits. They underbid everyone, used non-union labor, cut corners. They drove honest men like me out of business. They did it with lawsuits, with threats, with financial pressure I couldn't withstand. They bled me dry, Leo. It was a slow, deliberate execution. I lost the business. I lost the house. I lost everything. Everything except this old ice house. Maria and I bought it when we were young and full of dreams. We were going to turn it into something, a brewery maybe, or artist lofts. But we never got the chance. It was the only asset they couldn't touch because it was in her name, and the title was tied up in a way their lawyers couldn't crack. It was our last little piece of the world. By the time you were 16, I was broke. Not just a little broke. I was destitute. I was working odd jobs, barely making enough to keep food on the table. And I was sick. My heart. The doctor said I needed surgery, that the stress was killing me. I had no insurance, no money. I looked at you, a bright, growing boy with your whole life ahead of you, and I knew I was failing you. I couldn't give you what you needed. I couldn't even guarantee you'd have a roof over your head next month. So I made a choice, the hardest choice of my life. I walked into the county office and told them I couldn't care for you anymore. I made myself the villain in your story, Leo, because it was the only way to save you. The state, for all its faults, would give you a bed. It would give you 3 meals a day. It would make sure you finished high school. It was a terrible, cold, institutional solution, but it was the only one I had. Letting you go wasn't an act of abandonment. It was the last, most desperate act of love I was capable of. I died a little that day, but I knew you would survive. You have your grandmother's strength in you. I knew you would make it to 18, and I knew that on that day you would find your way here, back to the only thing that is truly yours. I had to stop reading. The letter trembled in my hand. The screen of my phone was blurry. I wasn't just crying. I was sobbing. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that tore through the silence of the office. The cold I'd been feeling wasn't just from the mountain air. It was the chill of a 2-year-old wound. A wound I thought was a scar, but which was now ripped wide open. He didn't leave me. He saved me. The story I had built my anger and my identity on for 2 years crumbled into dust. The bitter stone in my gut dissolved into a torrent of grief. I cried for the man who had to sacrifice his own heart, literally and figuratively, to give me a chance. I cried for the grandmother I never knew. I cried for the life we could have had, and I cried for the lonely, angry boy I had been, who had misunderstood everything. I sat there for what felt like hours, the flashlight beam making a weak puddle on the floor as my phone's battery started to die. The cold was brutal now, a physical pain in my joints, but I didn't care. I picked up the next letter and kept reading, my tears dripping onto the pages, smearing the ink of my grandfather's words. The other letters filled in the story. He wrote about his battle with Aspen Ridge, detailing their predatory tactics. He wrote about his love for my grandmother and his grief after she was gone. He wrote about me as a little boy, funny little anecdotes that I had long forgotten. He was creating a history for me, a family, a past that I had been denied. It was a gift of memory, a gift of truth. When I finally reached the last letter, the sky outside the big window was beginning to lighten from black to a deep, bruised indigo. My phone was at 5% battery. My body was numb with cold and exhaustion, but my mind was clearer than it had ever been. This last letter was shorter than the others. Leo, so now you know the truth of it, and now you have another choice to make. That company, Aspen Ridge, they still want this land. I knew they would. Their lawyer will probably find you the day you turn 18. They'll offer you money. It will probably seem like a lot of money to you, enough to start a new life, free and clear of this place and all its ghosts. And I want you to know, son, that it is okay to take it. There is no shame in that. Your life has been hard enough. Take the money, go to college, travel the world, fall in love, be happy. That's all I ever wanted for you. This building is just a pile of bricks and rust. Don't let it be an anchor if you need to be a ship. But there is another option. You could stay. You could fight. This place, this land, it's the last piece of the Rojas family in this valley. It's the last thing those corporate vultures didn't get their hands on. Fighting them would be hard, maybe impossible. I don't know what you would even do with this place, but it's yours. You could make something of it. You could put down roots where they tried to rip ours out. The choice is yours, entirely yours. Sell it and be free, or stay and be home. There is no wrong answer, only your answer. I trust you to make it. Your loving grandfather, Arthur. P.S. I was a handyman, not a banker, but I was never a fool. Look under the 3rd floorboard to the left of the boiler in the main pump room. Your grandmother always said to keep a little something tucked away for a rainy day. I think it's about to pour. My breath hitched. The boiler. I remembered seeing a massive, hulking furnace in a side room off the main chamber, what must have been the pump room. My phone was almost dead. I had to move now. I stumbled out of the office and down the screaming metal stairs. The first light of dawn was filtering through the grimy, barred window of the main door, casting long, eerie shadows across the cavernous room. I found the pump room. The boiler was a monster of riveted iron, cold and silent. To its left, the floor was covered in heavy wooden planking. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. The 3rd floorboard. It looked no different from the others. I got on my hands and knees, my phone's light now flickering ominously. I tried to pry the edge up with my fingers, but it was nailed down tight. I looked around desperately for a tool, a crowbar, anything. My eyes landed on one of the giant, rusted hooks hanging from the conveyor chain. It was heavy, but I managed to unhook it. Using the pointed end as a lever, I jammed it into the crack beside the board and put all my weight on it. The wood groaned, splintered, and then, with a sharp crack, the nails gave way. The board popped up. I dropped the hook and reached into the dark space beneath. My fingers brushed against cold metal. I pulled it out. It was another strong box, identical to the one from the office, only heavier. Much heavier. It was unlocked. I lifted the lid. My phone died at that exact moment, plunging the room back into near total darkness. But the faint gray light from the door was enough. I didn't need to see clearly. I could feel it. I could smell it. The box was full of cash. Stacks of it, bundled in paper bands. Old 20s, 50s, and 100s. And underneath the cash was a thick, leather-bound ledger. I picked it up. It felt heavy, important. I couldn't read it in the dark, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my soul, what it was. This was the rainy day fund. This was the weapon. I sat there on the cold concrete floor, in the heart of the decaying ice house, with a box of money in my lap and a book of secrets in my hands. The choice my grandfather had laid out for me was no longer a choice. It wasn't about selling out or fighting. It wasn't about being a ship or an anchor. He had given me the truth. He had given me the tools. He had given me back my family. And I knew what I had to do. I was going to stay. I was going to pay the taxes. And I was going to bring a storm down on Aspen Ridge Estates. This wasn't just a pile of bricks and rust anymore. This was home. Have you ever been handed a truth that breaks you and rebuilds you all at once? A moment that redefines your entire past and illuminates your future. For me, that moment happened on a freezing concrete floor at dawn, surrounded by ghosts and holding a box of my grandfather's hope. If you've ever had a moment like that, a turning point that changed everything, I want you to know you're not alone. This community is for people who have walked through the fire and are ready to build something new from the ashes. Thank you for being here, for listening this far. Now, let's get back to the story. The first thing I did was count the money. I took the box back up to the office, where the morning light was now strong enough to see by. I laid the bundles out on the dusty desk. 10 stacks of $1,000 in 20s. 5 stacks of $1,000 in 50s. 5 stacks of $1,000 in hundreds. $20,000. It was exactly what my grandfather had said it was. Enough for a rainy day. Enough to cover the $19,000 in back taxes with $1,000 to spare. $1,000 that felt like $1 million. It was survival. It was a start. The second thing I did was open the ledger. The leather was cracked, but the pages inside were pristine, filled with my grandfather's neat, blocky script. It wasn't just a financial ledger. It was a journal. A meticulously detailed account of every dirty trick, every broken contract, every threat, and every illegal maneuver Aspen Ridge had used to dismantle his business and countless others in the valley. Dates, names, figures. It was all there. It wasn't just evidence. It was a testament. It was his life's work, repurposed into a weapon. He hadn't just been waiting to die. He'd been building an arsenal. I sat there for a long time, just looking at the cash and the ledger. The sun was fully up now, and a single dusty beam of light cut through the grimy interior window, illuminating the desk. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel angry or lost. I felt a sense of calm, cold purpose. I knew my path. I needed to make a phone call. My own phone was dead, but there was the old one on the desk. I doubted it worked, but I picked up the receiver anyway. No dial tone, of course. I gathered the cash and the ledger, packed them carefully into my backpack, and locked the office and the main door behind me. Stepping out into the morning air was a shock. The sun was bright, the sky a crisp, brilliant blue. The cold was still sharp, but it felt clean, invigorating. The world looked new. I walked back into the tiny town. A plume of smoke was rising from a chimney at the diner across from the general store. A pickup truck rumbled past, the driver giving me a curious nod. I nodded back. I felt like I belonged here, which was a feeling I hadn't experienced in my entire life. Inside the general store, an old man with a magnificent white beard was stocking shelves. He looked up as I came in. "Mornin'," he grunted. "You're not from around here?" It wasn't a question. "No, sir, not yet," I said. "My name's Leo Rojas." The man's eyes widened slightly. He stopped stocking the shelf. "Rojas? Arthur's grandson?" I was stunned. "You knew my grandfather?" "Knew him? Hell, son, everybody knew Arthur. Good man. Stubborn as a mule, but a good man. We all wondered what happened to you after he left." He looked me up and down. "Heard you inherited the old ice house. Thought the developers would just gobble it up." "They're trying," I said. "Is there a payphone around here? My cell died." He gestured with his thumb toward the back of the store. "By the restrooms. On me." I found the phone and pulled out the card Ms. Albright had given me. I dialed her office number, my heart hammering. It was early, but I hoped she was in. Her direct line went straight to voicemail. I was about to hang up when she answered, her voice slightly sleepy but instantly sharp. "Eleanor Albright?" "Ms. Albright, it's Leo Rojas." There was a pause. "Leo? Are you all right? Where are you?" "I'm in North Fork. I'm at the ice house. Well, I'm in town now. Listen, I've made a decision. I'm not selling." Another pause, longer this time. I could hear her waking up, her lawyer brain clicking into gear. "Leo, we discussed this. The taxes." "I have the money for the taxes," I said, my voice steady. "I found it. He left it for me. $20,000. The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. "He what?" "And he left something else," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "A ledger. It details everything Aspen Ridge did to him, to his company. Names, dates, illegal dumping, payroll fraud. It's all here. I think it's what you lawyers call leverage." I heard her take a sharp, deep breath. The sleepiness was completely gone from her voice. It was replaced by something else, something I hadn't heard before. A steely excitement. "Leo," she said, her voice low and intense, "do not talk to anyone else about that ledger. Do not let it out of your sight. Where are you right now?" "The general store in town." "Okay, here's what you're going to do. Go to the post office. Mail that ledger to my office. Registered mail, signature required. Today. Then you're going to go to the county bank and get a cashier's check for the exact amount of the back taxes. I'll text you the precise figure. You will pay those taxes in person at the county records office. Get a receipt. With the money you have left, you will buy a sleeping bag, some food, and a charger for your phone. You will go back to that ice house, and you will wait for my call. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. She wasn't just a lawyer anymore. She was a general, and I was her soldier. "Good," she said. "Leo, you've done well. Your grandfather would be proud." When I hung up the phone, I felt 10 feet tall. I followed her instructions to the letter. The old man at the store, whose name was Henry, helped me package the ledger and sold me a coffee and a donut while I waited for the post office section to open. When I told him I was paying the taxes and staying, a slow grin spread across his face. "Good for you, son," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "It's about time someone stood up to those bastards." The rest of the day was a blur of errands. The bank, the county office, the outdoor supply store. With every step, I felt more solid, more real. I was no longer a ghost floating through the system. I was Leo Rojas, a property owner, a taxpayer, a man with a purpose. By late afternoon, I was back at the ice house. It didn't look so intimidating now. It looked like a challenge. It looked like mine. I spent the last of my daylight hours doing the first, most basic act of reclamation: cleaning. I found an old push broom in a closet and started sweeping the office. The dust was thick, caked on. As I swept, I stirred up years of stillness. Motes danced in the sunbeams, and the air filled with the dry, chalky smell of time. It was hard, filthy work, but with every push of the broom, I felt like I was clearing away not just the dust, but my own past. I was sweeping away the anger, the confusion, the feeling of being worthless and abandoned. That night, I laid out my new sleeping bag on the floor of the office I had just swept clean. It was still brutally cold, but I was exhausted, and my small meal of canned chili and bread was warm in my stomach. Before I fell asleep, I got a call. It was a smooth, confident voice. "Am I speaking with Mr. Leo Rojas?" "Who is this?" I asked. "My name is Mark Corrigan. I'm a project manager with Aspen Ridge Estates. I believe our legal team has been in touch with your representation regarding a property in North Fork." My blood ran cold, but my voice stayed even. "I know who you are." He chuckled, a slick, oily sound. "Good, saves time. Listen, kid, I heard you're thinking of rejecting our offer. Let me give you some friendly advice. That property is a liability. The taxes alone are a killer. We're offering you a clean break. 75 grand. You can be on a beach in Mexico next week. Forget this dump ever existed." "The offer has been rejected," I said, quoting the words Ms. Albright had told me to use. "Do not contact me directly again. All future communications should go through my lawyer." Corrigan's tone changed instantly. The friendliness evaporated, replaced by a sharp, menacing edge. "Look, you little punk. You don't know who you're dealing with. That land is part of our master plan. We will get it, one way or another. You can take the easy money, or you can learn a very hard, very expensive lesson about how the world works." I thought of my grandfather's letters. I thought of the ledger. I thought of his face, crinkling up when he smiled. "I think you're the one who's about to get a lesson, Mr. Corrigan," I said, and I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear. It was from rage, a pure, clean rage. The fight was on. The weeks that followed were a blur of hard work and strange, quiet days. I fell into a routine. I'd wake up with the sun, make coffee on a small camp stove, and then I would work on the ice house. My first project was the office. I scrubbed the floors, washed the big interior window until it gleamed, and even managed to get the ancient telephone working after finding a disconnected wire. I bought a cheap mattress and a small desk from a second-hand store in the next town over. I made that little room my home, my command center. Ms. Albright called every few days. The ledger had arrived. It was, in her words, a goddamn gold mine. She had assembled a team. They were cross-referencing my grandfather's notes with public records, building a case. Aspen Ridge had gone silent after my call with Corrigan, but she said that was a bad sign. They were regrouping, planning their next move. "They'll come at you with a bigger offer first," she predicted. "They'll try to buy your silence. When you refuse that, they'll get nasty. Be ready, Leo." I spent my days exploring every inch of the ice house. It was a labyrinth of cold rooms, strange machinery, and forgotten spaces. I found old tools, work logs, even a half-finished bottle of whiskey tucked away in a wall cavity. Each discovery was like a conversation with my grandfather. I was learning the building, and in doing so, I was learning him. The physical labor was grueling. I hauled out 20 years of debris. I shoveled out layers of dirt and grime. I patched the leaky parts of the metal roof with tar I bought at the hardware store. Henry, the owner of the general store, became a sort of unofficial mentor. He'd stop by with coffee, offer advice on repairs, and tell me stories about my grandfather and grandmother. "Your Grandma Maria," he told me one afternoon, "she was the real dreamer. Arthur was the hands, but she was the heart. She always said this place had good bones, that it could be something special again." His words stuck with me. Good bones. I started to see past the rust and the decay. I saw the soaring ceilings, the beautiful old brickwork, the sheer, magnificent scale of the place. It wasn't a ruin. It was a canvas. Sure enough, about a month after I'd arrived, a sleek black car pulled up outside the fence. A man in a suit got out. It wasn't Corrigan. This one was older, with silver hair and an expensive-looking tan. He introduced himself as a senior vice president for Aspen Ridge. He didn't threaten. He was smooth, conciliatory. He apologized for any misunderstandings. And then he made the new offer. $250,000, Mr. Rojas. And we will, of course, donate $50,000 to a local charity of your choice in your grandfather's name. A gesture of goodwill. It was a staggering amount of money. It was life-changing. But it was also blood money. It was the price of my silence. It was the cost of my grandfather's legacy. "The property is not for sale," I said, my voice as cold as the air in the ice house. The man's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went hard. "That's a mistake, son. $250,000 is a lot more than you'll get when the county condemns this wreck and bulldozes it." "This wreck isn't being condemned," I said. "I'm fixing it." He laughed, a short, sharp bark. You're going to fix this? With what? Good intentions?" He swept his hand around at the vast, empty space. "This place is a memory. Let it die." "No," I said. "It's a foundation. Now get off my property." The legal battle escalated after that. They filed motions claiming the building was a public hazard. They tried to challenge the will. Ms. Albright met them at every turn, using the information from the ledger to file counter-motions and launch investigations into their other projects. The fight moved from the front gate of the ice house to the courtroom. It was slow, expensive, and draining. My small fund of $1,000 was long gone, spent on legal fees and living expenses. I was taking on debt, but Ms. Albright was confident. "We have them, Leo," she kept saying. We just have to hold on. I held on. I worked. I started drawing up plans, sketching out ideas in a notebook at night. What could this place be? A community market? A performance space? A workshop for local artisans? The possibilities were as vast as the building itself. One snowy evening in early winter, as I was huddled over my desk, I got a call from Ms. Albright. Her voice was different. It was calm, but with a triumphant ring. "It's over, Leo," she said. "What do you mean?" They folded. Aspen Ridge. The State Attorney General's office launched a full-scale investigation based on our findings. They're facing massive fines, sanctions, possibly criminal charges. To mitigate the damage, they've offered a global settlement to all the families and businesses named in your grandfather's ledger. And they have withdrawn all legal challenges against you. The ice house is yours, free and clear. I sank into my chair, the phone pressed hard against my ear. It was over. I had won. We had won. They also offered a private settlement to you, Leo, she continued, as an apology for the undue distress caused to your family. It's a significant sum. I don't want their money, I said instantly. I didn't think you would, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. So I refused on your behalf. But I did make one non-negotiable demand. They are funding a grant program, administered by a third party, for small business development and historical preservation in North Fork. It's a lot of money, Leo. Enough to bring this town back to life. Enough to help you rebuild the ice house. I was speechless. I walked over to the big window and looked out at the main floor. Snow was falling outside, and the flakes drifted down through the holes I hadn't yet patched in the roof, dusting the concrete floor like powdered sugar. It looked beautiful. Peaceful. The inheritance my grandfather left me wasn't a building. It wasn't a debt. It wasn't even the money or the ledger hidden in the floor. His real inheritance was a story of integrity, of sacrifice, and of a quiet, stubborn love that reached across years and even across death itself to give me a second chance. He didn't just leave me a property, he left me a purpose. He didn't just give me a choice, he gave me the strength to make the right one. Looking out at the vast, silent space, I didn't see a ruin anymore. I saw a future. I saw a brewery where the boiler used to be. I saw a stage for musicians where the loading dock was. I saw a farmer's market full of light and life in the main hall. I saw a home, not a place I was given, but a place I had earned. A place I would build, with my own 2 hands, on the foundation my grandfather had left for me. I was no longer an orphan aging out of the system. I was the son of Maria and the grandson of Arthur. I was a Rojas, and I was finally home. My story isn't over. In many ways, it's just beginning. The real work of rebuilding this place, and this town, and my own life, starts now. But I'm not alone anymore. I have a past to honor and a future to build. And that's the greatest inheritance anyone could ask for. If you've made it to the end, thank you. Thank you for listening. My journey started from a place of feeling completely lost and abandoned, and it led me here, to a place of purpose and belonging. Maybe your journey feels like that too. Maybe you're at a crossroads, facing a difficult choice, or trying to make sense of your own past. I want you to know that your story matters. The lessons you've learned, the strength you found in the hard times, that's a part of who you are. This channel is a place for stories like ours. If this resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and join our community. And in the comments below, I want you to tell me one thing. What does the word home mean to you? Is it a place, a person, a feeling? I'm going to read every single one of your answers. because in the end, we're all just trying to find our way home. Thank you.